From scavenging to being a central player in a genocidal machine, Heinrich Himmler's life has been the subject of study for decades. In this video, we want to analyze some of the most striking aspects of the last years of the Nazi leader, from the confessions he made to his therapist, which included Hitler's illnesses and ethnic origin, to the mystical delusions that led him to search for magical items. From order to madness, from obedience to betrayal, these were the last years of the Nazi leader. The final period in Heinrich Himmler's life was marked by madness, obsession, and physical pain. Since he was a child, the main person in charge of the SS suffered from serious stomach problems. A heavy meal could put him in bed for days. Already in times of the Third Reich, Himmler resorted to the help of the physiotherapist Félix Kersten, who prescribed drugs that calmed the pain. This was the key to the trust and macabre mind of the Nazi hierarch. For several years, Himmler used him as a confidant, and thanks to Kersten's testimony, today we know some of the leader's most controversial secrets. Kersten's memoirs account for Himmler's aversion to Jews, which was inculcated from a young age by books such as Henry Ford's The International Jew and The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. He claimed that the Jews must be annihilated in their entirety. However, it was not until 1942 that Kersten heard of the death camps. It was in a casual chat, and to find out more about it, the therapist asked how things were going there. Himmler replied, "Too bad, lately there are only Jews with good teeth, so there is not much to get. A few months ago we received many from Holland, Belgium and France. From their heads we were able to extract large amounts of gold." This scared the doctor, who over the next few years subtly tried to convince Himmler to wind down the extermination of Jews. In fact, it is speculated that it was Kersten who convinced the leader to try to negotiate the release of prisoners with humanitarian organizations. We'll get to that chapter later. By 1942, Himmler was concerned that the Führer's orders were no longer clear and precise. He was furious and his mind collapsed. The SS leader asked Kersten to study the medical report of Hitler, who was suspected of having been ill with syphilis since the First World War. The therapist suggested that it would be best to put him in a mental hospital to treat nervous conditions, but Himmler replied that it was impossible, that he did not have the power to do it, and that, moreover, it could cause irreparable damage to the morale of the German soldiers. But the biggest surprise Kersten got was when Himmler assured him that the Führer himself has Jewish blood. He feels stained. According to Kersten, the Nazi leader warned him that it was the biggest secret of the Third Reich. Himmler detailed that both the maternal grandmother and the father of the Führer were half Jewish. The head of the SS assured that Hitler took care that nothing could be verified, modifying the official books and eliminating possible witnesses and relatives. Of course, the therapist's version is one of the strangest myths of World War II, and there is no confirmation other than his word. The doctor's records also documented the homophobic positions of Himmler, who advocated at all times for the repopulation of the planet with Aryan blood. This is really interesting, since Himmler himself defended chastity in his youth. As an adult, and with the power of a murderous empire, he had a wife and mistresses, and he severely questioned monogamy. The power gained by the SS, and Hitler's faith in him to orchestrate the final solution, made Himmler an eccentric who saw himself as a medieval emperor. He got carried away by his fascination with the occult arts and supported all kinds of crazy adventures, like an expedition of Nazi scientists to Tibet to find the supposed mythological origins of the Aryan race. He was also obsessed with obtaining legendary treasures with supposed magical power, such as the Holy Grail, the Spear of Longinus, and, oddly enough, Thor's hammer itself. In recent years, his assistants questioned his logic and he seemed increasingly lost in his delusions of grandeur. He not only fantasized about mythical treasures, but he lived like a king, with great luxuries, while his troops began to feel the lack of basic goods. His refuge in the world was the Wilsberg Castle, which he purchased in 1934 and on which he spent 15 million marks, equivalent to nearly $8 million, to make it the spiritual center of Nazism. As the war drew to a close, Himmler assured his men that he would take responsibility for the actions perpetrated by the SS. From early 1945, Himmler ordered a partial halt to the mass extermination of Jews, and even began negotiations with representatives of humanitarian organizations to exchange Jewish slaves for privileges for himself at the time of his trial. He also tried to negotiate with the British and Americans behind Hitler's back. He was convinced that, based on his image, a kind of transitional government could be created in Germany. The Allies knew that it was a matter of time to win the war, so they rejected the SS leader's proposal. The Führer eventually found out about this and ordered Himmler's apprehension. It was the beginning of the end. Cornered, one of the main responsible for the extermination of millions, he decided to flee. On May 10, 1945, after the capture of Berlin by the Soviets, Himmler left Flensburg with his trusted men. He was disguised as a sergeant of the Geheime Feldpolizei, the secret police of the Wehrmacht. On the 21st of that same month, the Allies captured him on a bridge between Hamburg and Bremen. He initially tried to hide behind his false identity, but the British managed to discover that he was none other than the leader of the SS. Since several high-ranking military and high-ranking Nazi officials and politicians had committed suicide upon arrest, they searched him and stripped him of his clothes. In them, they found vials of cyanide. They offered him the only available clothes they had, those of the English army, but Himmler did not accept, and for long hours he stayed in his underwear and covered with a blanket, demanding to speak with General Eisenhower or with Churchill. He did not accept minor interlocutors. On May 23, 1945, he was transferred and his clothes were returned to him. A bodily orifice inspection was performed to ensure that he did not keep anything hidden in his body. The review was quick until they reached the mouth. A crack of broken glass was heard. Himmler had bitten a cyanide capsule that he carried between his molars. The English tried to pump his stomach, but to no avail. To prevent his grave from becoming a Nazi pilgrimage site, the English authorities buried him in the area near his suicide in an unmarked grave, in a location never revealed. The young man who forged a path in the Empire of Terror rests in a nameless grave, and is remembered for his betrayals and delusions. To finish defining Himmler, we can resort to the words of Albert Speer, companion and minister of armaments of the Reich. He was half schoolteacher and half crazy. A combination of order, obsession, and a total loss of sanity. Such were the last years of Heinrich Himmler. Thank you for staying until the end. If you like this content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll meet again in the next military history video.